Hi, my name is Weston Jolly, and I'm so glad that you're joining me for this special broadcast that happens annually with the opportunity to take a glance into the future. So I'm going to be channeling about the future. Today is, of course, January 3rd, 2024. Hard to believe, right? I want to talk about the future a little bit because, of course, talking about the future gives us the illusion that there is a past and a future, and that's not necessarily true. But if we want to use this opportunity to become aware of things that are coming down the path, we want to also become aware that we, in this physical realm, don't want to have that complete understanding because it would negate the experience. But oftentimes there are things that are given to us, that are extended to us as an opportunity for us to become aware and to get properly positioned, to get balanced. And again, balancing the feminine aspects of all that we are, which includes the feminine aspect of who we are, regardless of your gender. And certainly the expressing piece of the masculine side, regardless of your gender, which is, of course, the combination of the yin and the yang, where these things come together beautifully so for you to reflect who you are in this realm. Now, let's be clear. Many of you have been waiting, if I use that term, for a long, long time, perhaps even beyond the illusion of time, to come to this very beautiful space and where we are. And we have been living in a very dynamic time and a very challenging time. Challenging in the sense that we have further aspects of the ego manifesting within our own selves, and of course even from a collective perspective. And we want to be clear that to go forward, we have to finish or become further appreciative of what the ego is doing for us so that we don't become enslaved to it. It's very easy to do that because of the conditioning of our minds and what we see in terms of our five physical senses, and we want to go beyond that. So as you listen to this channeling, I want you to be hyper aware of what it's like to give yourself a glimpse into the future and to get yourself properly balanced so that you can take advantage of this opportunity of that you're creating in this particular moment. So let me begin the channeling. As you continue to see yourself as you are, no longer depreciating or putting yourself down in any kind of what might be perceived as a negative way, these days have to come to an end. In your choice to allow yourself to see yourself as you are, there will be great illumination that's continued to be extended to you. This comes in the form of knowledge and, of course, information and choices for you individually so that you can go forward to create what it is that you've come here to manifest. You don't need to be afraid any longer, holding yourself separate, as if this is something that you need to do because of your perceived sense of self, which comes from the false sense of self, which is, again, labeled the shell or the ego. As you give yourself permission to really see beyond what would be described as the battery pack of who you think that you are in this incarnation, this embodiment, and currently this personality that you call real, it will enable you to go forward. This is a time of transition, likened to a wave where people individually and or collectively will continue to be enslaved by these aspects of who they think that they are individually and even collectively, whether that's a nation, whether that's a group, whether that's even an ethnic participation in what you've incarnated as. All of this has to be seen and yet appreciated, and yet not necessarily something that you constrain yourself to. This is something that brings you to a place that forces you, in one sense, to give yourself permission to go beyond these things that you've been exposed to in terms of your incarnation so that you can really truly break out. Many of you want to let go of what would be described as the conditions or the pieces that have indeed that you've held on to in this incarnation. And that this would be like the shedding one's skin or even the external appearance, again, of who you think that you are. As you give yourself true permission to exceed what has been created or manifested yet in this incarnation, you allow yourself to receive more. This is something that's very, very important. This has to do with every aspect of your choice to receive. That would be described as love, relationships, friendships, certainly the interconnections with society, and certainly as you would engage with Mother Nature. And this is very inclusive of health and certainly wealth. These things do not need to be divided, as you can only have one or two or a fraction or a piece of these things, because it's very important for you to incorporate all of it, especially in your choice to participate, meaning to express. As you give yourself permission to further collaborate, which means no longer thinking that you are alone, that choice, of course, comes from the shell or the ego, is something that must be seen, yet appreciated, and not necessarily given any attention. In the same way that you might hold a child, that would be described as a baby, and that you would give the attention to the child by quieting the baby, in essence, so that you can allow yourself to continue to have that connection that is yours to have. This time is unlike any other time in the incarnation of all humans in terms of this earth. This is something that you must feel. This is why there, for some of you, feels like an anxiety or an anticipation of something to come. And this is why we want to speak about even the illusion of the future, so you can be comfortable in the idea that you are on path. Giving yourself permission to let go of energies that have held you down and or repressed is something very significant. Some of you have chosen very, very strong incarnations to participate in what would be described as very hard pieces of your coming here, hard in the sense that it would be heavy or constrictive or limiting in terms of what you should or shouldn't do. These times have come to, again, an end in your choice to give it consideration. The time is now for you to give yourself permission to truly be who you are and no longer to hold on to attributes of the past. Very specific to things that will take place in terms of the community and certainly the world. The whole world is continuing to be faced with this acknowledgement of what they're going to create. And if this is going to be done alone, meaning in terms of one individual or even one group of people. This is why you can't participate in the idea of creating separation in terms of one group of people from one nation versus another. These borders that you have created are something, too, of an illusion. This is something that people tend to want to fight for, in the idea that this is my backyard or my country. And these attributes have to be seen for what they are. Egoic in nature, and the idea that something that would be described as yours, when clearly it's not. It's something that is ours to extend to you in terms of your stay and your incarnation in this world. As you see it from that perspective, it will enable you to create a greater collaboration. This is an opportunity that's given to you in terms of many aspects of what has been created from a technical perspective, enabling you to socialize through social media and attributes of like that in terms of technologies and extend the idea that you are more connected than you've ever been. However, you continue at this moment to rely too heavy upon technologies such as these devices in an effort that you must see yourself connected only through that device. It's not important that you would use a thing, such as a technology, but truly and now allow yourself to remain at one and yet connected with others. This comes through energy. This energy is something that you've been practicing, but a little bit out of balance, one could say, in the sense that you are not necessarily giving yourself full permission to come out into the illumination of who you are, in the idea that there's still fear, hesitation, perhaps even past life experiences that would dictate that you need to be careful. This is something that needs to be addressed in terms of your body and allowing your body to continue to be seen as it is, a vessel that continues to reflect back upon you those opportunities that are you and aren't you. Therefore, if you're experiencing pain, you're having anxiety, sleepless nights, or seemingly very easily pulled off balance based upon things or feelings that you're encouraged to have and to express in this realm with regards to others around you, that would be intimate relationships, and certainly that would be also the world at large. Some people, especially those of you who are very sensitive and empathic, you'll find that it's very, very easy to find yourself pulled in a direction to the point that you are unable to see yourself being in a balanced state. Even though that's very slight, is something very important for you to continue to address, no longer giving yourself permission to be restricted in any kind of way, especially pulled by energies that aren't yours. Those distractive energies, of course, that would keep you entertained, even addictively entertained, to the devices that I was pointing to earlier. As you give yourself permission to be seen, this is something that's very beautiful. Some of you have given consideration to the idea that there's risk in terms of you being seen. Further, that there might be states of harm that would take place in your choice to be seen, in the trueness of who you are. There have been people who have been escalating to degrees of allowing themselves to be increasingly sane, and yet it's time to be truly sane. This is the difference between engaging in the medium such as water, engaging yourself completely in the act of swimming, in the same way that you would not necessarily just put a toe in to claim that you are engaged in that modality or that medium. It's something that you are encouraged very much to experience in terms of this transition, in terms of who you thought you've been, in terms of this physical incarnation, and to transcend that into something else. This, of course, is called ascension in this realm, and it's just nothing less than you choosing to become who you are and engage with your higher self. This means allowing yourself to truly feel what's balanced or what's right, but not in terms of what's right and wrong, but what's balanced and right for you. As you give yourself permission to really acknowledge this, you'll find that some of you have come to participate in a characterization of what you have wanted to experience in this realm, in the same way that you might take on an avatar, an icon in a given game. This is something, too, that you must address and truly just see, feel, and observe. But if this is something that you wish to change, then, of course, it's something that has to be reduced or ultimately eliminated for you to go forward. The choice for you to collaborate within yourselves and or also groups is something that cannot be overexpressed, especially now. Again, the idea that you're connecting on all these different levels is really beautiful, but there are certainly divisions and groups thereof that keep what could be described as a higher class, or those who think that they're in control, wanting to manifest rules and or constraints or legislation about keeping those beneath this elite group or those elite groups as a means so that they can continue to remain empowered. This is something that's been done since the beginning of humanity, and of course this is nothing short of an illusion. If it is true that you truly want to submit to this particular authority, which for the most part has been masculine in nature, this is something that you must address, and giving yourself permission to either serve that individual or those people or that group, or to allow yourself to go within. This is something that has always scared what would be described as those people who are, quote, in power, because the process of going within is something that you do not need to gain, should we say, permission from another individual to have access to. Some of you understand what this means. Some of you quite literally don't. When we say or use the term going within, we're not necessarily talking about going into one's mind or the ego pieces of who you are, but allowing yourself to truly connect and allow yourself to feel what it is that you come to do in this realm, meaning to participate in the experiences and the joy of being here. You do not need to think that there's always something that you must do, as you must accomplish something, in the same way that you were conditioned in your schooling, that you have to go from this place to this next place to this next place, and this is what you're supposed to do with the entirety of your life. As we look into the new year, as you would reflect it, it's very important for you to see yourself as you are, and no longer to see yourself as somehow depreciated or separate. This means you have to address those pieces that are competitive within you, that has you thinking that somehow someone has something that you don't, and or that you need to protect something that you have that someone else doesn't. We're not suggesting that there has to be a change in the way you perceivingly govern yourself, as much as you must realize that these governing institutions will have a time as well, meaning a time in which they're not required or needed, because there will be a unification that goes beyond the boundaries, geographically speaking, and certainly even regards to the philosophies that you continue to practice. One philosophy of governing a body or group of people versus another. This is something that you've been doing as a matter of giving yourself permission to see who you are, and also to allow yourself to appreciate that there is something more. This takes a certain amount of courage, one could say, in giving yourself permission to truly be in touch with who you are, and at the same time not necessarily fit or participate in the group form in the way that you are constrained through the governing bodies or the people who are wanting to control you. That could be done through business and or even relationship. You must give yourselves permission to truly see yourself as you are, so that you can let go of these pieces of your past and or these self-induced constraints, even if you have removed yourself from the environment or the relationship that hasn't necessarily served you, so that you can go forward in a completely new capacity. This is extremely important, as you know that your choice to be in a balanced state is something that's very, very important. This is something we want to continue to emphasize. And if you're struggling with mental aspects of who you are versus who you're not, this needs to be addressed. This is why we're speaking very directly about this attribute of the ego, that this is going to continue to flourish, and at one point it's going to be either the downfall of what you come here to manifest, that would be individually into certain groups thereof, or giving yourselves permission to go beyond that, so that you can realize that your choice to incarnate here isn't necessarily limited to just the embodiment of, again, who that you think that you are. So if we talk specifically about what things will be taking place in the northern hemisphere of the world, you'll find that there is continued division that's going to take place within the country that would be described as the United States of America, because this is something important they want to see. This is also happening in different aspects of the world, especially those that have been appeared to be the strongest, that there is continued factions of allowing yourself to see what you are versus what you aren't. And the division of seeing yourself as one group within one group versus another, and identifying yourself within that group is something important for you to acknowledge, regardless of where you've chosen to incarnate. So even this message goes way beyond what would be described as the more North American individuals who continue to reside in those places. It doesn't extend itself to any place within the world. That you must understand that the governing bodies that have offered to control you or limit you, and to offer even further aspects of control, will become further and further more challenging as you continue to allow yourself to be, in essence, who you are, and no longer afraid that there's going to be a penalty, or someone's going to take something away, or that you need to participate in, again, some kind of limited status. As you see yourself truly as you are, then the idea that you become less than is something that's not, shall we say, attracted to you, and therefore there's no taking advantage of you. Many who have chosen to be empathic in nature, which would be described as extremely sensitive, have truly subjected themselves in a very lower vibrational state to those who would take advantage. Of course, this is part of the dynamic in terms of being here. It could be seen as a mathematical equation. But once you step away from participating as someone who's disempowered, then there's no room or no space for someone to participate in trying to control you, manipulate you, or even attack you in some kind of way. There's nothing to attack. As you see yourself again for what you are, then there are some things that you need to express. And we say this very clearly to some of you, not necessarily all, because you come to this realm to participate in going beyond what would be described as those things that you've chosen to do. That could be described as your job, your position, or even your roles and responsibilities within your given relationships. Because lovingly, as has been shared many, many times, this isn't something that's true at all. There is no role or responsibility that you're limited to. Many of you wanted to get in touch with what would be described as your purpose. And this has been addressed in topics such as the spiritual blueprint. Having an understanding of what it is that you've come here to do is something that is very deeply encouraged within each one of you. Yet giving yourself permission to truly unveil yourself in that purpose is certainly up to you. There's a tremendous amount of encouragement for you to continue to exist in this state, but you don't need to be limited. I mean, again, self-constrained or even self-sabotaging based upon conditions of what would be described as moms and dads, or even the further chain or lineage of one's family tree, realizing that there's no limitation to what you can express in this realm. We want to talk for a moment about vibration and certainly energy, because these are things that are coming up to the surface for many of you wanting to participate more clearly in these aspects. This has a lot to do with what you could describe as the language that you use to describe yourself and to describe things around you. Many of you are continuing to be limited by virtue of what you say, and this is something that happens to do with what you're thinking. That the idea that you can't have or exceed or express what has been a given plateau is, of course, something that's a limitation that has been conditioned upon you, and it has nothing to do with the truth. This is something that can require a great deal of practice. This isn't something that needs to be forced upon you, as much as you giving yourself permission to realize that you do not need to be constrained again to the shell or the limitations that it offers you through the egoic process of you being separate, because this is a part of your incarnation, but not separate to the degree that you constrain yourself from being truly who you are. As you give yourself permission to truly acknowledge that the thinking and the words that you're using does affect how you're manifesting as the creators that you are, then you'll find that there needs to be more attention, a great deal more of attention as you go forward, to having given too much energy or emphasis to the stories of what we described as one's past. If you can see that your past has nothing to do with this current moment, then you are free. This is something that we wish to talk about more in terms of going forward, so that you can be further detached, so that you can allow more information to take place. In this given moment, we are participating not merely to the facilitator that we're speaking through, but through the energy that clearly goes beyond what we describe as the camera and your choice to receive this information in the way that you are. As you get in touch with regards to what it is that you have been thinking, which has been for the most part controlled by the egoic pieces of who you are, the states of separation, you will find that much of that is taking you on quite a ride. Not necessarily something bad, not something that needs to be seen as good either, as much as to understand this is a part of your incarnation to be here, but not necessarily something that needs to continue. So therefore, giving yourself permission to have observation of what it is that's taking place in terms of your thoughts and the choices that you're making subsequent to that is important, and that can be seen within the body. This is why you're giving yourself permission to see how you're carrying energy in one part of your body versus another is something very, very important for you to address. Many of you have not given what would be described as anything but cursory attention to certain aspects of energies that you're exposing yourself to and then thus carrying. And this, of course, can manifest itself in an excess weight of any kind, not necessarily just physically. This is something you must address because, again, it has everything to do with what you're choosing to think. And, of course, that has everything to do with how that network is created within your mind / in the brain and certainly the body. As you let go of these pieces of who you think that you have been, you'll find that it creates a discomfort to the mind. And this is sometimes why you might hear yourself within yourself say that you might be seen as crazy or that you are crazy or something that's woo-woo in nature, when clearly that's literally that part of you, the shell, that's continuing to bark yet again. And as you give it attention to be real, then again it handcuffs you or constrains you in ways that aren't necessarily encouraged in any way, shape, or form. As you extend yourself beyond what we describe as the mind, there's a great deal that can take place. And therefore, giving your attention to the thoughts that are given to you, most importantly the vibrations, this can be integrated with the divine, which would be described as the universe. As you do this, you allow yourselves to become further at one, and certainly your abilities to manifest in terms of create is enhanced, again, in all categories, mind, body, and spirit. As you continue to integrate these pieces within yourself, it changes the outcome of the future. This is something that's very important. If you get nothing more from this message now than allowing yourself to realize that your mind has been carrying you down places or crevices or even cracks, sometimes it become very, very dark and to the point that you have felt lost. And for some of you, in the most extreme cases, that has led to attributes of depression, or even to the point that you feel like you can't exist in this realm any longer. And of course, there are no rules should you determine to remove yourself in some kind of way, and the idea that this is going to necessarily fix the problem. Clearly, from a physical perspective, it might, but it still doesn't address those pieces that are felt imbalanced within you. As you continue to see that within your own self, no longer allowing that to rule or to take you down in a different kind of way, you must realize that there needs to be drastic action to give yourself the opportunity to shift what will be described as that thinking that has everything to do with the past and that conditioning thereof, so that you can allow yourself to become at one, which is in essence the essence of who you are. No longer having to give it thought, meaning you don't have to think about becoming who you are. This is something that becomes incarnately easy for you to do as you give yourself permission to do so. There's nothing for you to force upon yourself as you go forward, but rather allowing yourself to truly be in a opened condition to receive more so that you can participate even greater. As you see this, you'll find that the energy shifts and allowing you to feel within your body that there's a certain time to participate in going forward and perhaps a certain time to enjoy what we describe as the wave as it would go down and it would go up. Each one of those opportunities in this duality is an opportunity for you to begin to prosper if this is something that you want to take action upon. You don't need to be afraid of something going down, the idea that it's perceivingly bad, when again, you can prosper in that opportunity in the same way that things can go up. In terms of the economy and those things that will be taking place in terms of the whole world, there will still be a reconciliation that needs to take place based upon activities that have taken place years before. This is something that has been given a certain amount of attention, but not to the degree that it still needs to be done to create the reconciliations necessary. This is also true of the Earth in terms of the climate. There's much more given attention to the means in which your incarnation that you're incarnating in this realm, and how it's affecting the climate and how it affects everyone. Some people are still clinging to the idea that they have no responsibility whatsoever, and of course these people will be having to address that within the physical realm as well as their esoteric participation thereof. This isn't necessarily something bad or something to be concerned about in terms of they're going to be penalized in any kind of way, as much as it's going to have a profound effect upon how they have, shall we say, negatively impacted the climate or the environment for all. However, the Earth is something that is sustainable, and again, even if it becomes to the point that there is a forced equalization or forced balance that has taken place even normally 4 years ago, where there is suddenly awareness to all the acumen of what would be described as the intellect specific to the whole world, that suddenly they find themselves disempowered through the simplicity of a virus that, again, extended in the pandemic form that it did. This is not to be forgotten, for the Earth has a means to continue to right itself, and if you don't find yourselves being in balance with it, then of course you will find yourself unable to stay. And that can be described in many different ways, for accidents and through perceived disease that don't necessarily have a cure as you might find it, because it's your means of exiting. This isn't something that you need to give undue concern about, as much as you must understand that the climate, the world, will continue to hold its balance as it has, as it's designed, in relationship to not necessarily just this plane, but how it participates in the whole. That's not necessarily just limited to this universe, as you think of that being the Milky Way. It's a cog in a wheel that has to do with the entirety of the universes, if you might reflect it that way, and that this particular place is balanced in that way with all the other pieces. This is something that's natural. And this is why there's encouragement for you today to give yourself more permission to be at one with who you are. There are some that may need to give further attention to what it is that they're consuming. This has to do with not necessarily just the food that you consume, but indeed how you're thinking or how you're being exposed to what attributes of media versus this attribute of media, realizing that sometimes, not necessarily always, the objectivity and presenting you different aspects of a perspective are very much shaded with the intention to attract that aspect of you creating a division, that you're in this side or this party versus that party. This is something that you must address, and this is something that you all must address. And if you don't, then there will be further chaos to the institutions that you've held to be real and of value. This is something, too, that you don't need to be afraid of, as these changes do take place, and sometimes things need to be destroyed in an effort for new things to be able to grow. This is something that you must give attention to within your own self as you see yourself attached to things that don't serve you. And that can even be described as long-term relationships that you've held to, and the idea this is something that you should do, trying to appease other in some kind of gold, platinum, or silver kind of way, that somehow there's a decorative means of being seen, even in relationship, that something is perceived as better versus someone who's in a relationship for perhaps days, months, or even weeks. It's important for you to give yourself true understanding to what you come here to do, so that these things might be exhibited. No longer holding yourself down into the crevices of darkness that happen within the brain / the ego aspects of you, but to allow that to be truly illuminated, and for you to give yourself permissions to really see yourself as one within the light. The light being, of course, a modality or medium for which it carries love, in the same way that this message is given to you through the presenter. You do not need to be concerned that there's something that you need to dwell upon in terms of receiving that which is pure love. And as you go to extend it, you don't need to think that you need to be taken advantage of, unless this is something that you hold on to in the idea that as you become more abundant, that you go into a fear-based state and that you have to use your abundance as a means to protect yourself. Again, egoic in nature. There's no need for you to protect yourself, but rather giving yourself permission more and more to create. This is something that's very important to, again, some of you, but not all of you. As you feel the need to participate in engaging in further aspects of who you are, giving yourself permission to do it without necessarily having to go through the thought or even the pieces of the past will give you an opportunity to experiment or discover more. This is something that's deeply encouraged. There's a great deal for you to continue to experience as well as you become further integrated with other people. This is no longer is limited to staying within your living room and looking at a set that delivers to you its programming news, not necessarily that which you would discover upon your own. And as you choose to go within, as has been suggested and continues to be suggested, you'll find that this isn't done through egoic perspective or truth, but rather that which would be described as universal truth, realizing that everything, that means everything, including every aspect of every member, every incarnation, is a part of the one, for how could it be anything less? As you see yourself in that balanced state, there will be a continued change that takes place within you, a peace that you can see within the presenter and certainly within your own self as you go forward to manifest. There does not need to be the hanging on to fear in the idea that you need to have something that could be described as money or the lack thereof, in the idea that you don't have enough. As you continue to hold on to those aspects that aren't true, then of course it creates the limitations of what you can express. This is something that needs to be finished or complete so that you can expand or create and manifest anything. That means truly anything, because you're not limited, for we aren't limited. As you give yourself permission to truly see that within yourself, you'll find that there is no constraints that needs to be self-imposed or conditioned upon you by others who think that you should or shouldn't based upon the classifications that they've been conditioned or grew up or exposed to. This is something to talk about real quickly as well. For each each of you have incarnated in what would be described as a home or a village or a community. Of course, because of that, you have been influenced by that particular geographic area of the world. And as you become further aware, or perhaps even further mature, there's an opportunity for you to expose yourself beyond that particular perception. However, that birth piece, those conditions that take place at the very beginning, tend to be very, very real. Some of you haven't necessarily moved or migrated outside of what would be described as those places that you grew up in. This isn't necessarily bad, but it is important for you to realize that that place that you grew up in isn't necessarily the place or the best place. There's many things for you to continue to express and open up your horizons, not merely through just literature or movies, but through direct exposure, allowing yourself to truly feel in the incarnation way, and even esoterically will give you greater expansion to realize what you're doing individually and again as a group. This is something will be addressed further as we go forward. In this moment, we wish you the very best in terms of your going forward, and of course to have you understand that there's tremendous encouragement that you do not need to hold yourselves back in any kind of way as you continue to see yourself as you are. Thank you.